Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Blue Ox base plate on a 2014 GMC Acadia. Having a base plate on any flat-toed vehicle is going to be the foundation to be able to get all of your stuff hooked up, and some of them are a little bit better than others as far as allowing you to have space to get everything attached, and this one does a pretty good job. Your safety chain loops stick out just enough in the grill opening to be able to hook up just fine. Your arms can easily be attached. There's a bracket for your 6-pull as well as your breakaway switch, which is really nice to have a spot that mounts up. Not all base plates do that. Now, something to keep in mind, I did end up having to move our license plate bracket. So if you're in a state that requires a front plate, you may need to move that up. I just drilled out the rivets and slid this up. But overall, once it's installed, it's a really clean look. And if you're just driving your vehicle normally, you're not flat towing, you can remove your arms by just pulling the pin and twisting, and that's going to give you an even clean look. So overall, not too bad looking. It keeps everything nice and low here, so it doesn't really detract away from the look of the vehicle. When it comes to flat towing any vehicle, there's going to be at least 5 main components that are required for flat towing. And the first one is going to be the structural mounting point to the frame of the vehicle, which is going to be your base plate. And your base plate's going to give you your mounting points for the rest of the components and bolt up to the frame of the vehicle and make it safe enough to tow down the road. It's also going to be your connection point to your tow bar, which is your second component, and that's going to be the connection point between the hitch on the RV and your base plate. And that's also what's going to lock in place as you go down the road, and many times where you're going to be running the rest of your components. Some of those other ones, just like a trailer, you're going to have safety cables, so in case of a disconnect, it's going to keep everything attached. We also have a braking system, and that's what our breakaway switch is here. So whether you have a fixed system or a removable system, portable system, whatever it may be, they're all going to have a breakaway switch. And this is going to be in case of a catastrophic disconnect where everything was to fail. It's going to pull this cable and apply the brakes on the vehicle so it's not rolling down the highway. We also have diode wiring, which is going to transmit the light signals from the RV from the 7-pull to this 6-pull and eventually to the taillights on our vehicle. And that's going to mimic the running lights, turn signals, and brake lights and keeping you safe and legal so people can see what you're doing. But also, some braking systems are going to require tapping into those. Now, when it comes to getting this installed, overall, this isn't the worst tow bar I've done, but it is a little bit tricky. There's drilling required. There's a few spots that are really tight. And the fit and finish overall, I wasn't overly impressed by it. But at the end of the day, once you get this installed, it's going to do the same thing as any other base plate out there on the market. I'll be walking you through all the steps to make sure you get yours installed. So if you're a DIYer and doing this yourself, follow along and we'll make sure we get it installed. But if this is something, watching the video, maybe you decide that you don't have the space, the tools, or even the want to do this, you can use eTrailer's dealer network locator. That way you can find a dealer close to you to get this installed, and that way you can have your Acadia ready to be flat towed. To begin our installation, we're going to want to open up our hood, and you'll probably notice there's quite a bit of plastic here that's going to be covering up some more spots to where the front fascia is going to be bolted up. So we're going to go ahead and get this cover removed. And this brings me up to the point of, during this whole installation, we're going to be taking off quite a bit of factory hardware. So I really recommend having a nice organized spot to keep all of that hardware. It'll make reinstallation that much easier. So the first thing we'll do is grab a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to just remove these plastic push pin fasteners. And there's going to be a slot on each of them, so if you can put your flathead screwdriver or your trim panel tool in there and just slightly pry it up, from there you should be able to get the center portion pulled out, and then you can remove the entire thing. Now, if they do separate, just make sure you get both pieces. But we'll go ahead, and anywhere where you find those plastic push pins, it looks to be like there's 5 on each half. We'll go ahead and get those removed. Now, once you get all the plastic push pins taken off, you're also going to see that there's going to be weather stripping right here on the cowl. We're going to pry this off. Mine just kind of popped out there, but that does hold it in. We're going to remove that on both sides. And with all that taken out, we'll grab our cover, and we're going to set this aside for now. Now at the front, where the top of the grill meets our body support or over our radiator, we're going to have a bunch of T20 Torx bit screws that we're going to remove. So we'll start here, and then as we kind of work our way above the top here, we'll just get those removed. We're also going to find that there's going to be 2 7mm bolts that we're going to remove as well. So we'll go ahead, get these all taken off. Now we're going to head to each of the wheel wells where we're going to find more T20 Torx bit screws, and we're going to get this wheel well liner peeled back. Now it's going to get a little bit tight here. I have just a small 1/4-inch ratchet with my T20 bit, so I can get to these pretty easily. But if you're struggling to get your tools in there, what you can do is hop in the vehicle, just put it in accessory mode, turn that steering wheel, and that's going to give you that clearance necessary. So we'll go ahead and we'll be doing this on both sides of the vehicle. So we'll get these all removed. With that hardware removed, we can take our inner fender liner and just kind of peel this back. And along where the fascia meets the front quarter panel, there's going to be 2 7mm screws that are facing up. So it's going to be a little bit tight here, but with an extension, you should be able to get to it. So we'll go ahead and get these removed. And once you get the other side done, we're going to head underneath where we're going to have some hardware that we're going to remove. Now there's going to be 2 T20 bits. You'll see those are kind of a continuation of that inner fender liner. So 1, 2, and then there's also going to be this 10mm bolt that we're going to remove. So we'll get this taken down, and then we'll also repeat that on the other side. Now we're getting ready to take our fascia off, and chances are if you're doing your base plate, you're going to be doing the rest of your flat toe components at the same time. So you're going to have the fascia off for a little bit. I recommend having a nice, safe place to put it to where it's not going to get scratched or damaged in the process. And something else that you might want to consider doing, taking a little bit of painter's tape, put it on the front quarter panel as well as the fascia, and that way when we pull this off, it's not going to rub against each other and scratch, or at least there's going to be a barrier there. So go ahead and do that. And pretty easy to get the fascia off. You're going to start on each end by pulling the tabs back, and you should kind of start to see it clip, and then you'll work your way towards the middle. So get both sides popped off first, and you're probably going to want an extra set of hands to do this, because as we pull this off, we're going to find that there's going to be some electrical connectors, and to have someone hold that there while we get that separated is definitely key. So with that popped off, we'll pull this back, and it looks like we have connections to the fog lamps on both sides, and so it's going to be similar to get these separated. We just have this white locking tab. We'll get this pried off here. In fact, it's the 2 side tabs you'll see here. Just pry those out a little bit, and then you can pop these off. And once we have both of those separated, then we can set our fascia aside. Now on our bumper beam, we're going to have a temperature sensor that's just on this small bracket. It's just a plastic push pin. We're going to go ahead and get that removed. And then we'll just kind of let this hang for now. At this point, you're going to want to grab a reciprocating saw. You could probably get away using a Dremel as well. But we're going to be notching out this portion for the base plate clearance. Now, you need to be real careful because we do have these hard lines for our AC that we obviously don't want to cut. So take your time here, but it pretty much just follows this bumper beam plate, and then we'll notch out this square. We're going to be doing the same thing on the other side. So get your safety glasses on, and we'll start cutting this out. Now once you have this cut out, I do recommend along these raw edges of the metal putting a little bit of paint on there, whether it be a clear coat, black spray paint, whatever you have, just to kind of coat up any of those raw edges so it doesn't turn to rust and corrosion long term. And once you have this one cut out, just repeat on the other side. Now on the driver's side, part of the air deflector by the radiator is going to need to be trimmed a little bit here just for clearance of the base plate. So starting up here, there's a plastic push pin. We'll get that removed. And you're going to want to use just a hand cutting tool. So I have a utility knife here that's going to cut through it. And the reason being is you do have the radiator right there, so you don't want to run the risk of damaging your radiator. It's kind of a rubberized texture here. So I'm just going to use my box cutter and cut this down along this line, and that should give us that clearance. Now at this point, we're going to be removing 2 of the bumper bolts. So you'll find that they're going to be 15mm sockets to remove them. These 2 are going to become the mounting point for our base plate. So once you remove them, just set them close by because we'll immediately be putting our base plate up. So we'll take these out. And it looks like our washer's kind of catching on the bumper beam here. So might have to fight it a little bit. There we go. Just a little bit of pressure pulling it down helped. We'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Now with the next set of hands, we're going to slide our base plate in place. So get those holes lined up, and then we'll take our hardware, and we're just going to kind of get them hand threaded in for now. Make sure we can get all 4 of them in place. Now this is also a good time to determine if you have any clearance issues with what we've trimmed so far, but I think we're looking all right. So we'll kind of just get these threaded in. And once you get one started on each side, it's going to make it a lot easier to get the other ones in place. It'll support the base plate. Now once you get those bolts all in place, you're going to want to tighten that up. And I do recommend just getting the base plate straight in to where it's sitting in the portion of the frame. Otherwise it's going to bind up a little bit. And getting these tightened down is kind of a pain. You're going to want a thin walled socket to accomplish that. There's just not a whole lot of clearance. Blue Ox didn't really do us any favors here. Now, something that I did run into was this bottom support bolt. This was running directly into the base plate to where I couldn't draw it back. So what I ended up doing was taking this down with a 15mm socket, getting the base plate into place, and then tightening it back up, and that seemed to do the trick. So once you get those all tightened down, we're going to need to drill some access holes to be able to get our nut plates in place. I'm going to probably use a step bit. And we're going to be drilling, there's a sticker here on the frame. I've marked that out with a chalk marker. But ironically enough, you're probably not going to be able to get that in there without damaging your washer fluid reservoir. They don't say anything in the instruction manual about this, but something that I would recommend doing is just loosen this up, move it to the side. That way we're not damaging anything in the process. It's just going to be, it looks to about 3 10mm nuts. You'll see them on the studs. There's one down here. There's also one tucked back here. I do recommend having maybe some zip ties or a bungee ready to support this, especially when it's full of fluid. It's going to be a little bit heavy, but I'll go ahead. I'm going to remove the nuts first. Now I went ahead, I used the where the stud goes through the mounting point. I just zip tied this up. You may need to unplug the horn to kind of get this in a situation to where you can drill through. And there's this UPC code. I'm going to kind of just go through there with my step bit. I'm going to get my pilot hole in there. It's pretty tight here, and you have this portion of the frame that's just kind of in the way. Now the main reason we're drilling this out is to eventually get our handle nuts in place, and we'll be drilling underneath here to get the bolts up. We will be bending these tabs to kind of get them aligned. So if you need to go a little bit larger, that's not a bad thing to do because it'll give you a little bit more room to move this around and get it aligned. This is not exactly a great spot here to be drilling, so do your best, take your time. Main thing is we're not damaging our reservoir bottle. So I'll go ahead, I'm gonna go in kind of about the middle of this UPC. I'll start a pilot hole and then we'll take our step bit and enlarge that out. If you do have your hole saw, you can also utilize that. It's kind of up to you here. Now you're going to be taking your time and going through this. It might take a little bit, and we'll coat that up just as we did before because it's raw metal with a little bit of paint. But also, before you do that, the next thing that we're going to be doing in order to get that handle nut bolted up is going to be drilling out the bottom holes on our base plate. So there's one here, and then behind the gusset there's going to be one more. And those are going to be the spots where we feed up the bolts to the handle nuts to tighten them down. Now, I have a right angle or short drill here, and it's going to be kind of tricky. I can't really get a straight shot. It's going to be at a slight angle, but we're just going to make sure that it's large enough. And then once you drill that out, I'll be using a 17/32 is what they call for. Just have that bolt ready, and that way you can test to make sure that it slides up nice and easy. If you need to, you can waller that out a little bit more just because we're at that angle. And then we'll be repeating the same steps on the other side. So go ahead, get those drilled out. Now the bolts that we're going to be feeding up through those holes that we drilled are going to need a split washer. So there's going to be 2 on each, obviously. And we'll start by getting the back one in place first. And these are going to go in the spots that we just drilled out. So that's why it's important to make sure that these do feed up there. And with that kind of in place, we're going to take our handle nut, and this is going to slide in and try to get this aligned to where we can thread it in. But obviously, our angles are going to be a little funky here. So go ahead and you can make some bends to where this will drop down on a flat spot to where we can thread this in. And it's going to take a little bit of finagling and some practice here, so don't get stressed, just take your time here, and we're going to try to get these started. Now I finally got these threaded on, and they did give me some trouble. In fact, I just could not get this one started. I drilled a little extra hole just to kind of give myself a visual to get it started. Now once you get them started, we're going to go ahead and get these tightened down and torqued. We can do this at the same time. We're going to be using a 3/4 inch socket, and it's going to be important, don't break those tabs off quite yet, because otherwise it's just going to free spin without being able to be torqued down properly. So as we torque this down, we'll get them both tightened, and then we can break off those tabs on the weld nuts. Now, torque settings are found in the instruction manual. Just look at the hardware and use the chart that they have to dial in your torque wrench. And if you need a torque wrench, you can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. But this is going to make sure that long-term our hardware is going to be tight enough, but also not too tight, putting stress on any of the hardware. Now with those torqued down, to get these to pop off, you don't really have to remove them, but to get this out of the way so we can bolt this back up, you're just going to want to take these and just kind of wiggle them back and forth. If you need to, you can grab a pliers and just kind of grip them and twist them around. Honestly, a lot of times if you just move them around a decent amount here, they should pop off. So we'll go ahead, we'll torque down the other side, we'll get these removed. Now once you get everything torqued down, I went ahead, I got my reservoir bottle back in, I plugged in that horn here that we took off to get that out. And we're going to grab our safety cables that we have and our quick links. And this is going to be just in case of a catastrophic disconnect. If all of our hardware was to fail, this is going to be the last line of defense of keeping our base plate, which is attached to the tow bar, attached to the frame of the vehicle. And the way to do this that I found is just take one end and I wrapped it around the body mount here and kind of came out right at the hole. And then we'll just wrap this around. Now, it really doesn't have to be tight because, again, this is last line of defense. The main thing is we just want to make sure it wraps around the frame and then attaches to the base plate in this loop. And on the other side, you may run into, there's a belt that's kind of tucked right there. So you want to be careful, obviously, that's not going to make contact with anything that's going to be moving or anything in the engine bay. So once you tighten down your quick link, what you can do is just zip tie this up to where it's kind of out of the way, just because again this is just in case of that catastrophic. So I'll go back and zip tie this all up. Now you probably remember our temperature sensor that we removed, and as we go to put this back on the original bracket, this is not going to fit. You can see right away that it's going to be hitting our arm. So what we're going to do is cut this portion off and re-drill a hole with the same diameter a little bit higher. That way our temp sensor stays in roughly the same position, but it's going to have that clearance. So go ahead, cut off this tab, and then we'll take our drill bit that's going to be the same size as this hole, re-drill, and then pop that back in. So I went ahead, I drilled out that hole, and this should give us that clearance to pop this back in place. With our sensor back in place, we've officially installed our base plate. Now, since we have the fascia off, I mentioned previous, you're going to want to get the rest of your components all set up, and that way you can get all the wires ran nice and clean. And we'll come back a little bit later. I'll show you how to get the fascia put back on and show you how everything looks. Now I have everything all mounted up. All of our other components are ready to go, so we're ready to get our fascia put back in place, and it is going to require some trimming. So the best way to do this is I like to mock this up based on trying to get it close to where the original mounting holes are, and then as we kind of slide this in place, it's going to kind of paint the picture of exactly where things need to go. I can already tell right away that I am going to have to be doing quite a bit of trimming here, but having a paint marker or a chalk marker or something handy to mark out where you want to cut is going to be key. And you can always cut off more, but our goal here is to really just make it as clean as possible so this can draw in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It looks like a lot of this grill portion I will be cutting out to give us that clearance. Now I ended up cutting out pretty much the entire bottom grill, and we do have some clearance issues. So our 6-pole bracket, you can see it's kind of flexing this down a little bit, so I ended up bending this up a little. It's also hitting on our base plate on the plastic right in this corner. So Not for sure if that's going to cause any issue as we try to draw everything back together. I did end up taking off our license plate bracket. I'll probably just move the plate up a little bit higher because that's going to be in the way of our 6-pull. But once you're happy with all the clearance and everything's starting to bolt together, we're just going to put everything back in the reverse order that we took it off. Just make sure that you're plugging in your fog lamps and any other electrical connections that we had. And that was a look and installation of the Blue Ox base plate on a 2014 GMC Acadia.